The news.
The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has said that the 68th anniversary of the North Constantine attacks and 67th of the Somam Congress reflect the pride of belonging to a land of martyrs. And Algeria has strongly deplored that the resort to violence has stepped on the way of a negotiated political solution to the crisis in Niger. And as the Economic Community of West African States has not excluded launching a possible military intervention in Niger, the country's new leaders have spoken out in favor of a national dialogue. And those were the major developments. Now, the full news edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has addressed a message to the nation on the eve of the celebration of the National Mujahid Day, marking the double anniversary of the North Constantine attacks and the Somam Congress on August 20th, 1955 and 1956, respectively, in which he stressed that this event allows to remember tremendous sacrifices made during the glorious Liberation War. He underlined that we celebrate this year the 68th anniversary of the North Constantine attacks and the 77th of the Somam Congress, which reflect the pride of belonging to a land built by the blood of the brave martyrs who sought in the new generation the love of the homeland, the national awareness, and the loyalty for the message of November. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And the President of the Republic also paid in his message tribute to the Mujahidat and Mujahideen or veterans as well as the violent martyrs who sacrificed their lives for Algeria. The Speaker of the Council of the Nation, Salah Gouchil, has highlighted that the recent visits by the President of the Republic to different countries reflect Algeria's diplomacy among the nations. In an interview with the Algerian television, Mr. Gouchil said that the visits were successful at the political and economic level.
The recent visits of the President of the Republic have further boosted Algeria's position at the economic level because political independence should be backed by economic independence. Even in time of the revolution, just after independence, we spent 5 years dealing with our issues and building up our state. Political independence was not enough. All the economy was in hands of French companies. We started with the nationalization of mines in 1966, then the nationalization of companies, until the nationalization of oil and gas. This is considered a decolonization of our economy to back our political independence. We are still working on liberating our economy from dependence. Today, Algeria is among very few countries which are not indebted to anyone, and no one gives us instructions. The evidence is that Algeria deals with all countries. They all know this, and they all respect us. We have been to China, Russia, Europe, America.
And earlier, on the occasion of the celebration of the double anniversary of the North Constantine attacks and the Somam Congress held on August 20th, 1955 and 1956, respectively, Salah Gouchil highlighted the symbolism and importance of these two pivotal events in the history of the glorious November Revolution, praising the great interest shown by the President of the Republic in the issue of national memory. Algeria has strongly deplored that the resort to violence has stepped on the way of a negotiated political solution to the crisis in Niger. A communiqué issued by the Algerian Foreign Ministry expressed Algeria's regret that the recourse to violence came on the way of a negotiated peaceful political solution to bring back constitutional and democratic order in the brotherly country Niger. The communiqué added that Algeria remains strongly convinced that a negotiated political solution is still possible, stressing that there are still ways and means toward a peaceful solution to the crisis in Niger. It reiterated that the history of our region showed that military interventions bring more issues than solutions, as they cause clashes and divisions instead of stability and security. Algeria called on all parties at issue to restrain wisdom and reason before the incurable military solution happens and before the region plunges into violence, highlighting that priority should be given to a political solution that spares Niger and the whole region the consequences of violence, notably terrorism and all kinds of criminality. And as the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has not excluded launching a possible military intervention in Niger, the country's new leaders have spoken out in favor of a national dialogue. During a TV broadcast or speech to the nation, General Abdurrahman Tiani announced the launching of a national dialogue and revealed a first schedule of transition, which he assured would not exceed 3 years. Earlier, he met with the members of a delegation of the ECOWAS led by Nigeria's former president Abdul Salami Abubakar on a new mission to try and defuse the crisis in Niger. The country's new leader, General Tiani, said there were undoubtedly hope that the visit paid by the ECOWAS delegation would help find a way of reaching a settlement of the difficult crisis besetting Niger. And the ECOWAS delegation members also met with dismissed President Mohamed Bazoum. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And during a meeting held 2 days ago in Accra, Ghana, by the ECOWAS Army Chiefs of Staff, the organization's commissioner to the political affairs, Abdel Fattah Musbah, reiterated that the organization was ready to settle the crisis peacefully, but only if Niger's new leaders agreed on such an initiative. The organization's commissioner said a possible intervention in Niger was still an option, considered by the ECOWAS leaders who have already set the date for its launching. He argued that the ECOWAS Army Chiefs meeting in Accra had agreed on the strategic objectives and the necessary equipment and reiterated the commitments of the organization's leaders to such a potential intervention. 14 hours 37 minutes, Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And the UN Deputy Secretary General has met in Bamako with the Malian Prime Minister to lay the bases for a new cooperation following the UN mission troop withdrawal from Mali, scheduled to be completed by the end of this year. The UN officials stressed that such a new collaboration would be carried out with the approval and contribution of the Malian authorities in a bid to better understand the expectations of the Malians and to readapt to possible solutions. The UN mission deployed in the country since 2013 has stated withdrawing from the country following the UN Security Council's decision to put an end to its mandate at the request of the country's new leaders who seized power in 2020. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry has warned against what it's called the Israel strategic plan to promote occupied Jerusalem, denouncing the initiative as attempts to Judaize the city. It was quoted by the news agency Wafa as saying that the Israeli schemes were rather aimed at altering the characteristics of the city in all aspects, notably in its demographic dimension. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry denounced as such a segregationist plan as being part of an open war waged by the Israeli occupying authorities against occupied Jerusalem and against the Palestinian presence. The move, it went on to say, it is aimed at extending the settlement building, speeding up the annexation of the West Bank, and to unilaterally undermine all political prospects. Earlier, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry condemned in its strongest words the attacks carried out by Jewish settlers against the municipality of Hawara in occupied Jerusalem. The attacks targeted the Palestinians, their houses and cars in various villages near the city. This came as scores of settlers today stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque esplanade amid a reinforced security imposed by the Israeli authorities on the Palestinian population in occupied Al-Quds. And the Russian army said it had thwarted a new Ukrainian drone attack targeting Moscow and its surrounding region. It said the Russian regions of Rostov, bordering Ukraine, and Kursk were today hit by drones. 5 people were wounded in the attack that came in the wake of airstrikes carried out by the Russian forces against the region in the northern part of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President today hailed, as he put it, the historic decision taken by the Netherlands and Denmark to supply Kiev with U.S. F-16 fighter planes. To Latin America now, and in Ecuador, more than 13.4 million voters are heading to the polls today as part of the early presidential elections. Voters are choosing the president and the vice president, as well as 137 deputies of the unicameral Congress. Ecuadorians also decide today through a referendum on the pursuit or not of oil exploitation in the Amazonian jungle of Yasuni, a unique indigenous land and reserve of biodiversity. And people in Guatemala are choosing today their new president between 2 social democrats following a campaign marked by promises to fight corruption. Bernardo Arevalo, son of the first president democratically elected in Guatemala, Juan José Arevalo, promised to follow the steps of his father to improve education, combat violence, and fight corruption. Sandra Torres, for her part, 3 times candidate, promised to fight criminal gangs and poverty. 14 hours, 41 minutes, Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. That's it for our news bulletin. Now, the headlines. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has said that the 68th anniversary of the North Constantine attacks and 67th of the Somam Congress reflect the pride of belonging to a land of martyrs. And Algeria has strongly deplored that the resort to violence has stepped on the way of a negotiated political solution to the crisis in Niger. And as the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has not excluded launching a possible military intervention in Niger, the country's new leaders have spoken out in favor of a national dialogue. 14 hours, 42 minutes, Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And as we said earlier, Algeria is celebrating today the double anniversary marking the attacks of August 20, 1955 and the holding of the Somam Conference in 1956. 2 major dates in the history of our November Glorious Revolution. And on this occasion, I invite you to listen to this program presented by Jamal Salmani.
Today we introduce you to an Algerian revolutionary female activist, Jamila Bouhaired. Jamila Bouhaired was born in 1935. She was a member of the National Liberation Front during Algiers' war for independence from France. Jamila Bouhaired is regarded as a leading heroine of the Algerian War of National Liberation and as a vocal activist in the movement for women's rights in independent Algeria. Jamila Bouhaired came from a middle-class Arab Muslim family from Algiers and was educated in European-type school. Her story can be understood only within the larger matrix of colonial Algeria. By the revolution's eve, when Bouhaired was in her late teens, Algerian demands for limited political and civil rights had been repeatedly rebuffed by the French regime and the nearly 1 million European settlers in the country. The nationalist struggle thus evolved into armed conflict in rural areas from 1954 until 1956, when the FLN's military strategy shifted to the cities. She worked as a liaison officer and personal assistant of FLN commander Youssef Saadi in Algiers. She was considered valuable to the FLN because she looked European and could easily infiltrate places where French soldiers hang out. Bouhaired and other young women played a critical role during the battle for Algiers, which began in September 1956. Bouhaired assisted the FLN leader Saadi Youssef in recruiting young Muslim women from the capital who could pass as Europeans. Dressed as French women, Bouhaired and two other female militants placed concealed bombs in the European sections of Algiers. 2 bombs exploded, but Bouhaired's bomb failed to detonate. This event and others unleashed the Battle of Algiers, which raged until 1957. In April 1957, during the hunt for Youssef, she was wounded in a shootout between Youssef and French troops and taken by French troops. She was tortured with electricity and then sentenced to death. Her execution was stopped after a media campaign by her French lawyer, Jacques Vergès. However, Bouhaired became a cause because of international media coverage of the French army's systematic use of torture, and she was eventually released in 1962 and was regarded as a hero in Algeria. In the early 21st century, Jamila Bouhaired continued to be actively involved in feminist politics, advocating fundamental transformations in the legal, political and social status of Algeria's women. She was depicted in the film Jamila the Algerian by late Egyptian director Youssef Chahine. Legendary Lebanese singer Fayrouz sang about her, and also famous poet Nizar Qabbani wrote a poem devoted to her.
جميلة بوحيرة رقم الزنزانة 90 في السجن الحربي بوهران والعمر 22 عينان كقنديلي معبد والشعر العربي الأسود كالصيف كشلال الأحزان إبريق للماء وسجان ويد تنضم على القرآن وامرأة في ضوء الصبح تسترجع في مثل البوح آيات محزنة الأرنان من سورة مريم والفتح. الاسم جميلة بوحيرة، اسم مكتوب باللهب مغموس في جرح السحب، في أدب بلادي في أدبي. العمر 22 في الصدر استوطن زوج حمام والثغر الراقد غصن سلام. امرأة من قسطنطينية لم تعرف شفتاها الزينة، لم تدخل حجرتها الأحلام، لم تلعب أبدا كالأطفال، لم تغرم في عقد أو شال، لم تعرف كنساء فرنسا أقبية اللذة في بيغال. الاسم جميلة بوحيرة، أجمل أغنية في المغرب، أطول نخلة لمحتها واحات المغرب، أجمل طفلة أتعبت الشمس ولم تتعب. يا ربي يا ربي، هل تحت الكوكب يوجد إنسان يرضى أن يأكل أن يشرب من لحم مجاهدة تصلب؟
Hello and welcome to this new edition of the Health Magazine. Diabetes is one of the most threatening diseases of our time. In addition to adults, this disorder can also affect children at an early age. Type 1 diabetes in children is a condition in which your child's body no longer produces an important hormone which is called insulin. Your child needs insulin to survive, so you'll have to replace the missing insulin. Type 1 diabetes in children used to be known as juvenile diabetes or insulino-dependent diabetes. The diagnosis of type 1 diabetes in children can be overwhelming at first. Suddenly, you and your child, depending on his or her age, must learn how to give injections, count carbohydrates, and monitor blood sugar. Type 1 diabetes in children requires consistent care, but advances in blood sugar monitoring and insulin delivery have improved the daily management of the condition. The signs and symptoms of type 1 diabetes in children usually develop quickly over a period of weeks. These signs and symptoms include increased thirst and frequent urination. Excess sugar building up in your child's bloodstream pulls fluid from tissues. As a result, your child might be thirsty and drink and urinate more than usual. A young toilet-trained child might suddenly experience bedwetting. Extreme hunger. Without enough insulin to move sugar into your child's cells, your child's muscles and organs lack energy. This triggers intense hunger. Weight loss. Despite eating more than usual to relieve hunger, your child may lose weight, sometimes rapidly. Without the energy sugar supplies, muscle tissues and fat stores simply shrink. Unexplained weight loss is often the first sign of type 1 diabetes to be noticed in children. Fatigue. Lack of sugar in your child's cells might make him or her tired and lethargic. Irritability or behavior change. In addition to mood problems, your child might suddenly have a decline in performance at school. Fruity smelling breath. Burning fat instead of sugar produces certain substances, ketones, that can cause a fruity breath odor. Blurred vision. If your child's blood sugar is too high, fluid may be pulled from the lenses of your child's eyes. Your child might be unable to focus clearly. So go and see your child's doctor if you notice any of the signs or symptoms of type 1 diabetes. The exact cause of type 1 diabetes is unknown, but in most people with type 1 diabetes, the body's immune system, which normally fights harmful bacteria and viruses, mistakenly destroys insulin-producing islet cells in the pancreas. Genetics and environmental factors appear to play a role in this process as well. Insulin performs the critical job of moving sugar, glucose, from the bloodstream to the body cells. Sugar enters the bloodstream when food is digested. Once the islet cells of the pancreas are destroyed, your child produces little or no insulin at all. As a result, glucose builds up in your child's bloodstream, where it can cause life-threatening complications. Risk factors for type 1 diabetes in children include family history. Anyone with a parent or siblings with type 1 diabetes has a slightly increased risk of developing the condition. Genetic susceptibility. The presence of certain genes indicates an increased risk of developing type 1 diabetes. Environmental risk factors might include certain viruses. Exposure to various viruses may trigger the autoimmune destruction of the islet cells. Diet. No specific dietary factor or nutrient in infancy has been shown to play a role in the development of type 1 diabetes. However, early intake of cow's milk has been linked to an increased risk of type 1 diabetes, while breastfeeding might lower the risk. Complications of type 1 diabetes develop gradually if blood sugar levels aren't well controlled over a prolonged period of time. Diabetes complications can eventually be disabling or even life-threatening. Those complications include heart and blood vessel disease. Diabetes dramatically increases your child's risk of developing conditions such as coronary artery disease with chest pain, heart attack, stroke, narrowing of the arteries, and so on and so forth. Nerve damaging. Excess sugar can injure the walls of the tiny blood vessels that nourish your child's nerves, especially in the legs. Kidney damage. Diabetes can damage the numerous tiny blood vessels clusters that filter waste from your child's blood. Eye damage. Diabetes can damage the blood vessels of the retina, which may lead to poor vision and even possibly causing blindness. Skin conditions, diabetes, may leave your child more prone to skin problems, including bacterial infections, fungal infections, and itching. And osteoporosis, diabetes may lead to lower than normal bone mineral density, increasing your child's risk of osteoporosis as an adult. There is currently no known way to prevent type 1 diabetes. Children who have a high risk of developing type 1 diabetes can be tested for antibodies associated with the disorder, but the presence of these antibodies does not make diabetes inevitable, and there is currently no known way to prevent type 1 diabetes if the antibodies are found. Researchers are working on preserving type 1 diabetes in people who have a high risk of developing the disease. Other research focuses on preventing further destruction of the islet cells in people who are newly diagnosed. While there is nothing you could have done to prevent your child's type 1 diabetes, you can help your child prevent its complications by helping your child maintain good blood sugar control as much as possible, teaching your child the importance of eating a healthy diet, and participating in regular physical activity, scheduling regular visits with your child's diabetes doctor, and a yearly eye exam beginning no more than 5 years after the initial diabetes diagnosis. There are several blood tests for type 1 diabetes in children. Random blood sugar test. This is the primary screening test for type 1 diabetes. A blood sample is taken at a random time, regardless of when your child last ate. Glycated hemoglobin test. This test indicates your child's average blood sugar level for the past 2 to 3 months. Fasting blood sugar test. A blood sample is taken after your child fasts overnight. Your doctor will likely recommend additional tests to confirm the type of diabetes that your child has. It's important to distinguish between type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes because treatment strategies differ. These additional tests include blood tests to check for antibodies that are common in type 1 diabetes, urine tests to check for the presence of ketones, which also suggests type 1 diabetes rather than type 2. Your child will need regular follow-up appointments to ensure good diabetes management and to check his or her A1C levels. Your doctor will also periodically use blood and urine tests to check your child's cholesterol levels, thyroid function, and kidney function. In addition, your doctor will regularly assess your child's blood pressure and growth, check the sites where your child tests blood sugar and delivers insulin. Anyone who has type 1 diabetes needs insulin treatment to survive. Many types of insulin are available, including rapid-acting insulin, insulin therapies such as Lispro, Aspar, and Glulicin. Start working within 15 minutes, peak in about 1 hour, and last 4 hours. Short-acting insulin therapies such as human insulin should be injected 20 to 30 minutes before a meal, peak in 1.5 to 2 hours, and last 4 to 6 hours. Intermediate-acting insulin therapies such as NPH insulin start working within about 1 hour, peak in about 6 hours, and last 12 to 24 hours. Long-acting insulin therapies such as insulin glargine and insulin detamir have almost no peak and may provide coverage for as long as 20 to 26 hours. Depending on your child's age and needs, your doctor may prescribe a mixture of insulin types to use throughout the day and night. As a conclusion, remember that a healthy diet and physical activity can help your children cope with diabetes type 1 and lead a normal life. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the Health Magazine. Do join us next week for a new edition of our program with another health issue to shed light on. Goodbye for now.
This is Radio Algeria International, the all-news channel broadcasting